The question isn't, have you made a potato chip block? But the question is, how many blocks have you made? Oh my goodness, this block is so simple. It is a scrap buster like none other, and it just works beautifully. We talked about how to use a block and make a supersized hot pad. It's gorgeous. We also talked about enlarging the center square to help make the block quicker and bigger and larger, and it works beautifully. I love it. But now you've got all these blocks. What are we going to do? We need to quilt them, and I am going to show you the easiest method for quilting your potato chip block quilt. I'm Leah Louise from Inspired Quilting by Leah Louise, and I have an easy solution for you, the easiest. Let's go. I'm sure you remember these blocks from a few weeks ago. These were the first potato chip blocks that I did, and I incorporated the black and white fabric, and I love how it turned out. And what I want to show you today is how to put these blocks together, how to quilt an easy meandering quilting pattern, and add some binding with a beautiful backing, and we're going to have a finished quilt. You will just love how easy this goes together. I want you to understand how to make the potato chip block. There are some things along the way. There are a few tips and techniques that will make it easy for you, so I'll review that real quick, but then we're going to get right into putting the quilt together, how to trim it in order to get the binding on, all those important things. So we have a lot to cover. We need to get started. I've been busy sewing, and I want to catch you up on where we are. Once we're at this point, what we're going to do is take the black fabric, because we used white already, so we're going to put a black fabric in here, and then we'll put one more piece right there. So this is the next step. We're going to use whatever the opposite of this is over here, and then add another color strip, another rectangle. Now, let me show you how these turned out. This is what it looks like first. So I have a white strip here, so I added the black strip. And I went through each of these, adding those pieces on, and then I press them. And once I have this finished, I add a color piece, and I put that on the opposite end. So you can see here, I have my black with the white center square, and here I have the black center square with the white on the end. And both of these then will have the color strip on the bottom. Now, we're ready for a game-changing step now. It's going to totally change the look of this. And it's funny about how we start with this little block here, which essentially is a two rail. This is a rail fence in and of itself. But we add these two pieces on, and does it remind you of a particular block? This is how you start a log cabin that is what's called the courthouse steps, where you put the tops on and then you do the sides. And that's what we're going to do now. But this isn't a log cabin block. Well, actually it kind of is. But so many quilts have so many parts of all kinds of different blocks. And it's just fun as you're going along the way to kind of identify what it is. So here we are. I have my white centers with a black end and a color on this end. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add, because the black is here, I'm going to add a white one. So I did white, then I added black, now I'm going to add another white one. I could certainly put it over here, and that's not a problem, but I like to put it on the opposing side, just, kind of balance it out a little. But now I need to put a black one in. So there's a couple different ways you can look at this. And I want to find one of my black ones here. We're kind of going with purple on this block, aren't we? Now, I know I'm not going to want to put the block, now this is a tongue twister. I don't want to put the black block side by side. So I'm going to turn this way. And I don't necessarily want those to be the same. I think I kind of want it to go this way. There is no right or wrong. There is the necessity of putting this double piece on each side, but whatever way you lay it out, you do it your way. I don't want the blacks to be side by side. I want to have color in between there. And this one, even though it's a white and a black next to each other, there's enough contrast there is here too. So you will have areas where some of the blocks will, come together, but that's okay. As long as no two colors are right next to each other. I like that. Okay, so there's one block, right? And when this finishes, it's going to measure 8.5 inches. And it's going to be a nice square. And again, it's the beginning of the courthouse steps log cabin block. This is white, so I need to add a black strip. And I'm not going to want it over here. I'll want it on this side. Colors, because these are kind of a lot of pastels. Now, I can go this way or I can go this way. And there's enough contrast there that that's going to work out fine. And I kind of like, though, that the pinks are crossing over here. So that's kind of a fun one for me. And then on the light side, so now I'm going to need a white piece more. So once I do this and I get all my blocks ready, there's one more step. And I think you can probably guess what that's going to be. So what we're going to do now is put a second row on this. So we have our center, we have our first row, and we're going to put the second row. This is kind of what I go by. Since I have white here, I'm going to want to put a black up here and do my white down on this end. I'm going to turn this a little bit since we're going to be going this direction with the block. You can see it better. All right, so I brought my white down here. And then I have a black, make sure I get the wrong side down, and I have the black up on this end. Now again, I can put it here if I want, and it really doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. The idea is you just, get alternating whites and blacks in there. Sure. Put your quilt together, put the squares, the rectangles where you like them, and have it fit and look the way you enjoy it, because this is your quilt. This is going to be a quick finish now. You see we're going to put these pairs on. I have a number of blocks here I've got ready to go. Let me get these finished and I'm going to show you what's next. And check this out. This is so awesome. And see, everything is made with these pairs. So these are singles that we put in on our double-sided piece. Then we put pairs on each side and pairs this way. Now, a pair is not going to fit right here. What we're going to have to do is come in and add another rectangle. And so, again, you do it the way you want. Do you want to put it there? Do you want to put it here? I kind of liked this being right there, but that was a bit more blue than I want. Then I looked up here. I've got a blue in each corner. It all is going to work. And, don't be quite as, what do I want to say? Anal as me? Is that the way I want to say it? Probably not, but there's some truth there. and just, make it work. And I know I keep saying that, but we can make this so difficult, but it doesn't need to be. There's just some wonderful, wonderful fabrics we can work with, and we want to make a beautiful quilt. And I'm going to, I don't want those side by side, so let me go with this one. And I think I'll put that up here, and then I'll find a kind of there's some kind of purpley blue. So that would look good. There's another one. So let me show you how this looks once everything is together. Look at this. Aren't these wonderful? Oh my goodness. These blocks are so fantastic. And I love the way all these colors just work together. It wraps around, but yet you don't really see a specific pattern. There isn't something that jumps out and, where you see triangles or stripes or something like that. But they just are a lot of fun. And everyone is so different. Now, the way I'm going to put this together is you want to make sure that your side pieces go alternating. So if I were to put this next to this, I have seams that match. If I go this way, my seams don't match. And check out these beautiful colors. These blocks are such fun. They look gorgeous. And all that color spread out is really fantastic. These quilt blocks go together very easily. As I showed you, you want the seams that join the blocks together to have unaligned seam allowances. We don't want to be matching anything. So where there's 3 here, we want the 2. And we have 3 here, but we have 2. And we do that all the way across. The other thing is this is black horizontal. This is white vertical. This is black horizontal and white vertical. If you do the horizontal and vertical, that will give you these opposing seams that you don't have to align the seam allowances for. And that makes it quite easy. So once you get these put together, now actually you can go ahead and chain piece or web stitch the whole thing together. What I did is basically I sort of did that, but I cut it apart to show you how it finishes. Now here you can see the same pattern. We have black up, on the top, horizontal. It doesn't matter if it's top or bottom as long as it's horizontal. And this is vertical, and then here's your black horizontal. Now I sewed all 5 rows the same way, just like that, and I chain pieced them one right after the other. But then what I did is I took every other one and flipped it. So that put the white end here. So let me show you. So with this, my first row, again, black horizontal, white vertical, all the way across. Then I came down and I did my second set, but instead of cutting my threads here, I just came straight through. And you can see the black here and the white's the same there. It just made it easier to sew my blocks together that way, and then I wasn't worrying about the pattern, just putting blocks together. Now, the other thing, when you get to the end, all your rows are going to go together like this. So what you do instead, let me just do it this way, is you cut one row apart at your cross stitching and just turn it the other direction. So you see now where I have the black horizontal, I also have the white vertical here. And see how these are opposite all the way across. So there are a number of methods you can use to assemble it. Whatever works for you is fine. For me, this was simple because it didn't take too much thought. If you were to chain piece it with the patterns going opposite in each row they change, I would get confused and make a mess because I tend to daydream and, do whatever while I'm sewing. But I wanted to make it easy so I could go through it. And so I would take this row and add it right there. And then this row and add it right here. And you can see then how the pattern goes, and you don't have any matching seams along the sides of the blocks, just where the rows align. And that's very easy because there's only, let's see, I did 4 blocks, so that's only 3 points where they match. Out of all these blocks, that is terrific. So I'm going to put the quilt together, and then I'm going to do the backing, but let me show you some of my choices. I'm really hoping I have more of this because I think that would be a fantastic binding, but I don't know. This will be a good backup if I have enough. So I'm kind of getting down to the bottom of some of my choices, but I really want to go black and white here. This would be another option, and I can always mix fabrics too. But as far as the backing, let me show you what I have. I have 3 yards of this. Oh, that's good to know. I have more of that in case I need it. And I should have about 3 yards of this. Now that means I may be doing some piecing along the way to make it all fit, but I can manage that. Oh, look what I just found. But I also have a couple yards of this. So, I can do some piecing on my backing, but there's my binding. That makes me happy. All right. Let me grab that. So I will use that on something else. I really want this because when you fold it over, let me show you. I just love how this looks. And so you sew it on like this, then you fold it over, and you get just little triangles. So it's not super busy, but it just looks wonderful on the edge of the quilt. And that's what I want. It's going to highlight the black and white blocks, and then all the colors just sort of look like a beautiful accessory. And there we are. So let me go ahead and pull all this together. I will get the quilt sandwich spray basted, and then we'll start some quilting. Super simple, easy quilting. I recently showed you how to do diamond quilting on a potato chip block, and it's fabulous. It looks terrific, but it does require straight seams, straight sewing. I'm going to show you a way that we can do this much easier, much more forgiving, and you can sort of just weave your way across the quilt in a matter of minutes. So let me get ready. I can't wait to show you that part. All right, my quilt sandwich is together, and I just want to show you a real quick tip of what I do when I'm putting my quilt sandwich together. You can see the backing that I chose, and that worked out great. I had just enough. Actually, I had extra, but I had enough to piece it, and it worked out well. Now, when I'm putting my quilt sandwich together, obviously the backing goes down first, and I will tape it. And in this case, I only needed to do the corners and then one in the center of each side. And I always want my tape to be opposing each other, because if you put like a piece up here, a piece down here, and then a piece over here, these are pulling this way, this is pulling this way, and you may get sort of a wavy line. So make sure your tape is directly across from each other on your quilt backing. It's just, it's a small thing, but again, small things add up, and I find that works really effectively. So what I do next is I get my quilt batting, and you see how I put it within an inch of the edge. Now, I don't worry about the others. I always cut my batting and my backing 4 to 5 inches larger than my quilt top. And so I have plenty of room to do this. I leave that extra inch there, and then I put my batting along these two sides 1 inch from each edge. That way I know I'm nice and straight. So then I'll just let the other kind of corners fall in together, and it lays really nicely. If you get that one corner in, everything else is going to be good. You just don't want to do any stretching. So I lay the batting down, then I do my spray baste. So I'll fold it back about 1/4 to 1/3 of the way, spray it, bring it down, go to the other side, fold it back, do the middle, bring it back, and then do the rest of it. And that depends on what you're working with, what size it is, what kind of space. Are you doing it on a wall, on the floor? Mine is on a wooden floor, so for me, it just works good to do it in sections like that. Now, once the batting is down, I sort of walk across it. I don't scuff my feet, but I just walk to press everything in place so I know that it's going to hold well. Then I come in with my quilt top, and you see I do the same thing. It's about 1 inch. I say 1 inch. This probably looks like it's more than an inch and 1/4, not quite 1.5 inches. This is a scant inch. It doesn't really matter. The key is that you're consistent, that you just, start in a corner, bring yourself straight down each side, and as long as you have these edges taped straight, it should all go together really well. And then this is the corner that I'm going to start quilting in. And what I'm going to do, we have a rectangle, and we're going to go just like this through the quilt. But if it were square, let me see if I can find all the parts here that I need. So I'm going to lay my quilt out, and if it were square, and you may have seen how I've done this before. I've done this on other quilts. When it's a square quilt, you just kind of work your way, and you make sure this is equally distant. Well, you can't really do that, because if you do, by the time you get to the other end, you're going to come up at a point above the corner. It'll end up being right up about here. Now, that's okay if that's what you want, but I want to go corner to corner. if I follow it exactly, that's like a 45-degree line. You're cutting your quilt into a triangle with that stitching. That means you're going to have to, consistently hit certain corners and certain spots. And if you don't, you're going to be able to see how you're missing those points. So what I'm going to do is take my quilt and just sort of lay these crossways. So I have my corner there, and I'm just going to kind of fold it like this. And so I've got it a bit pleated, and what I'm going to do, I thought I could mark this, but I think I'm going to need to grab some pins. Okay, so I've got my safety pins, and I use the large ones that have the curved edge. I just find those work best for me. And so I'm going to use the ruler, and here's my long ruler, and I'm just going to kind of put it corner to corner. And you can't quite see that corner over there. Let me see if I can drag this in. It's pretty much there. And how about this one? Okay, so we're going to put that ruler on that corner and line it up over here. And even if it's not exactly on, this is all going to be close enough. So we're going to put a pin in here. I'm not going to close the pin because I'm not exactly sure if I'm going just through the top or if I'm catching that bottom layer. And I don't want to catch too many layers in here. I just want to get the quilt top and this half of the quilt sandwich. Okay, so if I do that, and I'll put another one down here to be about right there. And now I will fold this over this way so that I kind of have a spot there. Now, you may not hit these pins exactly as you go across, but you know what? It's going to give you a pretty darn good place to start. So let me kind of do this. So if it's easier, line your pins up. Let's see, there we are there. And this one goes here. And then you can, kind of see where to put your next one in between. And just by having a few along in there, it's going to make it easier as you sew when you're doing your quilting. So now I'm going to make sure I'm not catching anything underneath and that I have all 3 layers, and I'm just going to pin that. So what I'll be doing as I'm going is aiming for the pin. And okay, now here's one, and this happens sometimes. That's why we put more than just a couple. See how this one, it obviously got folded. And I'm just going to kind of tuck it right in there. And this one's good. And this one. And then this goes from here to the corner. I'm going to bring that one down about 1 inch. And that's it. So this is your guide. This is what you're going to use to get from one corner to the other. And it's very simple. It's very forgiving. And the kind of quilting that we're going to do is a wavy stitch. And it doesn't really matter. It's not going to be visible in an accurate manner that someone can say, oh, you went too far this way, you went too far this way, because it's all going to just meander, and meandering is wonderful. It's not unlike, the stippling quilting that you see. It just sort of goes everywhere, but on a much larger scale. All right, we're ready to get started. I have my walking foot in, and I'm starting at one corner. I'm going to be sewing along to this pin, so you can see as I'm going along, I'm going to go from that corner all the way here. And I'm just going to meander as I go. Now I do lengthen my stitch just a little bit. I sew with a 2.5 when I'm piecing. When I'm quilting, I go to a 3.0, something light like this. Anything heavier, I do go to a 3.5. I have my quilting gloves. What else do we need? I've got a relatively new needle and my machine just got back from the shop. Oh my goodness. And you know what it was? It was the foot pedal. And oh my goodness, who knew that could go wrong? But luckily, the repair shop that I go to, he saves old parts to Viking Husqvarnas, and he had an extra foot pedal that someone had to return with a machine that didn't work. So apparently he collects parts. God bless that man. And it just was perfect, and it fits great, and it sews wonderfully, and I'm so glad to have my machine back. All right, now, taking care of business. Let's do some sewing. I'm just going to start in the corner, lock it with a few stitches, and then I'm going to take some long meandering curves. And what I'm going to do is set this pin so that I have a straight line between my needle and the pin I'm going to. Now, it's easy to get caught up in corner to corner. And if that's easier for you and you want to do it, from this corner all the way to the other side, that's fine. But I think this is going to save some time and effort and be more forgiving. And that's always a good thing. So we're just going to start with my hands holding everything in place. And we're going to just go back and forth. If you find you need to stop, the best place to stop is in a seam or in a very dark fabric. The reason being is even if you have the needle down, your fabric is going to move a little bit. And if there's any tension on it, when the needle lifts, the quilt might move and you could get a little stitch kind of waver one direction or the other. You're probably the only one who'll ever know it, but it will make you crazy that it's there. So now what I'm going to do is keep coming this way, and I'll turn it around when I can show you in a minute. I'm taking long curves here. Whoops, I forgot which direction I was going. Okay, so that was going that way. So we're going to continue with a curve here. And see how I'm just using my hands just to kind of guide myself. And there's my pin. Look at that. I'm pretty much spot on. Take some threads out. So I'm going to remove the pin so I don't run into it with my walking foot. And now I'm going to get the next pin, which is right down here, and line myself up so that I know I'm going in the general direction that I want to. And I'm looking at my stitching, making sure everything looks good. And here we go. And the first row is going to be the most challenging. After that, we're just going to follow the other rows that are already there. So let me go ahead and do this, and I'll show you what's next. And you can see as I'm quilting, I keep my fabric nice and flat in the middle, moving everything along as it needs to. I'll roll this up on this side and just keep sewing till I get to my next pin, which is right there. So let me pull that pin out. And I'm going to get the next one, which is right here, and just line it straight from my needle to that next pin. And let's see. I also want to make sure I'm staying in my same curve pattern. It looks like I'm kind of going that way. I can't tell. Let me pull this out. Okay. This one this way. Okay, we're going this way. I forget to look when I go to stop to see where I am. Am I going left or right or in a curve or out of a curve? There we go. And now I'm going to come out right at the opposite corner, and I'll stitch off a ½ inch or so just to lock in the stitches. Now, this is when it gets easy. I'm going to raise my presser foot all the way, and you can see just this long meandering curve, and you can take it as wide or as narrow and change it up, and it's whatever you want to do. Now I am going to go about 2½ inches apart, and so if I were to go from the top down to here, you can see that means there's going to be a little bit on each side. So if I go from that straight line from here to here, 2½ inches will be about this way. And it's just a general guide, because you're going to be going in wavy directions. Now, the other thing that I suggest is if you take long meandering curves, on the next row, make them not quite so long, or make them a little wider. Sometimes wide can be too much, though. Yeah, I think having alternating rows of a little bit narrower or shorter curves next to the long works well, because these curves are following along in the same direction, and as long as they look generally alike, your eye's just going to follow the overall pattern of the quilting and not specific lines. Now, you can see I've come this way, so I don't want this to follow that curve, so I'm going to kind of come in this way and around, and that will sort of change it up between the rows. So you can see how I'm working against that curve. I'm not trying to stay in alignment with it. So here, I'll come in a little closer, and then I'll go out. And because my curves are shorter than this, they're also going to fit within those larger curves. So it's not going to match really close at all. And there we go. The second row of quilting is finished. And I think that took me 2 minutes. So this goes really quickly once you've got your lines in there. So you see all we're doing, do you see how those two lines kind of follow along each other in the same general direction, but not at all in the same exact pattern? And so let me show you one more, and then I will finish this side and be ready to turn my quilt around and go the other direction. I'm getting kind of close. I wanted to be a couple inches apart, so I just need to kind of get myself straightened out here. And if you find yourself doing that, don't try and do it all at once. Work your way out slowly, and then it's not going to look like you're sewing along and then boom, making a quick turn there. The other thing I want to show you about the advantage of going on a diagonal. The big thing for me is I start in the center and I work to the edge. So the first row is going to have the most bulk on the side, but every row I take after, this bulk minimizes and it gets easier and easier to maneuver. And I just find that kind of keeps me moving faster rather than constantly wrestling. When you go straight down the center, you've always got that roll to the side. But when you're doing it on a diagonal, it seems to, disappear quicker, and I really appreciate that. It works well for me. So I'm about halfway through. I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm on row number 6 and moving right along. And I finished this side completely. I've turned my quilt around, so this is the unquilted side. You can see all the lines of quilting over here. And I'm just going to work from the opposite end. I still have plenty of bobbin thread. That's a good thing. So I am going to start here and just work my way through again on this half. And when you're getting ready to do the long edges, just lay your quilt comfortably in your lap and fan it so that it'll pull out easily as you go, and then you'll just roll this as needed. When you feel like your quilt is starting to pull, maybe from the edge here or from your lap, just stop with your needle down and kind of adjust it so that it's loose and it can move freely. That's just going to make it a lot easier to quilt. And then just sort of drag this along, hang on to it, and pull it as you go. Off. We'll go ahead and get this side finished, and then it's time to add the binding. Oh my goodness, we're practically there. Invariably, at some point, you're going to run out of bobbin thread, and that's where I am right now. So I'm going to show you how I get my bobbin thread replaced without losing where I am. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull this out, get some thread here. There we go. And I want to pull a couple inches, leave a tail, both at my needle and on the quilt. Now, I don't know if the bobbin is completely empty or just getting close. So what I'm going to do is pull this, and then, all right, I'm just going to have to pull it off altogether. Okay, there is still a bit of bobbin thread on there, but what I'll do is come to the back of my quilt, and I'm going to pull probably about 3 or 4 inches and cut it. So let me go ahead and, oh yeah, there we are. We were right down to the end there. That was the last little bit. So let me get my new bobbin in there. I'm using white thread on the bottom because this is very white. Ooh, that, I think, is that white or is that blue? I can't tell. I better grab another one. Looks like it had a blue tint to it. And the reason is I like white on white. Now, I'm using cream on the front because there's so many different colors. And I could have gone with black. The only thing with black is if the tension were the least bit off, I'd get little stitches, loops coming through on the back of my quilt, and I don't want to deal with that. So I have my thread. My bobbin is replaced. Now I'm just going to lift my pressure foot all the way and get back to where I left off, which is why I leave a good long tail, because then I can find it. So the first thing, let me just see if I can enlarge this. This might be better with a close-up. There we go. So we're looking right here. And what I'm going to do is pull this top thread, and you see how the bobbin thread loop will come up. So now what I'm going to do is pull both my top and bobbin thread to the side. Now I am going to start sewing about 1/4 of an inch back, about 3 stitches, and that way it's going to lock it in place. I'm also going to hit my back stitch. It's actually a lock stitch, and I'm going to start right here. Now, when I put a new bobbin in, my machine trims that bobbin thread so it's very short, and I don't have to worry about bringing it up to the top. If you have a long bobbin thread, when you first put that bobbin in, then do the same thing. Bring your needle down. Let's do an example here. So put this down. So bring your needle down, and then when you bring it up, you should be able to just pull this, and see how I've got the little tiny tail, and then pull everything aside. So I only have these 3 threads. I'm going to push that little tail aside, drop this down, and make sure I'm in line, just like that. Okay, so my stitch is going to lock itself in, and then I'm going to sew right over those same stitches. So I'm locking my new thread and I'm sewing over the previous threads, and that's going to hold everything nicely. And then I'll just continue, and once I get to the end, I'm going to show you how I trim that. All right, let me just come to a seam right here. So now what I'll do is I'll come back here to where I did the new bobbin, and you can see, I think you can see pretty well if I hold the threads over this way. So I have my old threads that I pulled through from the back, and I'm going to cut that all the way down. I have my new top thread, and I have my bobbin thread. And so now look at, that's nice and finished. You don't even notice that. And one wash or two or even a couple shakes will pull these threads into the center, because that's what happens with a quilt, is the batting will sort of poof up, and the stitching will kind of embed itself in between the rows of where it's quilted. And there we are. So don't let a bobbin, changing a bobbin be a problem for you, because you see how simple that is. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish this side, and then we're going to be all finished with the quilting. And while I'm moving my quilt back to the other side, I do just want to show you how it looks on the back. You really can hardly tell. So here's the stitching coming. This is away from where I overstitched, but you can see there where those stitches are doubled up. So that's going to hold everything in place, and it's not even noticeable. It's a great way to do it, and I've been doing it for years, and it works wonderfully. All right, I'm going to continue quilting. We're just about there. Here's a view of the quilting on the top, and you can see all the curvy lines going diagonally across the quilt top, and you can see it on the back. It's not quite as visible because it's pretty much just tone on tone, but you do see the dimension of the quilting, which is perfect. Now, what we need to do is get this trimmed in order to get the binding on. So I have my binding all cut and I have it sewn, but right now I'm going to trim this, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger so you can see more of what I'm doing. Okay, here's a better view so you can see what I'm doing exactly. You can use a 24-inch ruler if that's what you have, but since I have the larger cutting mat, I went ahead and bought a 36-inch ruler, which works great, and it's wonderful for trimming quilts because I can get so much done in one cut, because I can get that extra dimension. So what I'll start with is I start in the middle of whatever side I'm doing, and I leave it sort of even on each end, and I put that corner and that corner even with the edge of the quilt. Now the next thing I do is I look across to make sure everything's okay. I mean, if I have, like, this is the one that's standing out to me. See how this protrudes out beyond the ruler? Sometimes as you're quilting, when the line comes out, it pushes that fabric. I don't want to cut that fabric off, so I'm just going to take my fingers and sort of rake it in a little bit. And that way it's going to cut it nice and smooth. I have another little spot here, because we're just talking like, not even a quarter of an inch. But I don't want to pull it in so that I have just batting. I just want to get it lined up with the quilt top along the edge. And then I'm going to hold this really tight. And actually, I'll go ahead and use my large cutter. Make sure I'm on the spot here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is work to each end. So on this, I'm going to use this line. Let me pull it over so you can see it better. I'm going to use this line of my ruler along the edge of the quilt top. So that line on the edge and the edge of the ruler on the top of the quilt. And then I'm going to just align my quilt so everything's nice and even. So we have a nice straight cut there. And then what I'm going to do is just cut across here. And there we are. So see how easy that was? And let's do this other side. Same thing. So I'm going to align, there we go, align a vertical line on my ruler right at the corner of the fabric of the quilt top. And see this piece still, remember before that was the one that was giving me a little grief, but that's okay, we'll just tuck it down in. There's some here that want to protrude out as well, so I'm just going to hold those down, and there we go. Whoops, a little edge there. Now this little bit that kind of wanted to come and go, when the binding is on here, that's going to all lay nice and flat, and it's going to be straight. It's not going to be an issue. But I don't want to lose that edge of the block so that that block kind of has a notch taken out of it, a scoop that's been cut out. So this way everything is nice and straight, and I've already cut this side. So now I'm going to go ahead and get my binding on. Now, I'm not going to show you the binding because this video is getting really long, but I did a binding video a month or two ago that I'm going to include here. It has a lot of different information, but some really good binding ideas that will help you. So let me go ahead and finish this, and I'll be back with a completed quilt. Here is the finished potato chip block quilt. I think it looks wonderful, and you can see how the center of each block, they rotate, and the colors are just everywhere, and you really don't see a particular block, even though we know that's it right there. They all have such a unique look, and it all blends together. It's a wonderful, wonderful scrappy quilt, and so much fun. You can see the quilting lines going diagonally. I think it works beautifully. It's quick and easy. You saw how easy it was to do, and then putting some fun binding. I think that looks terrific. That black and white looked awesome. And there we are. So that's how you can finish your potato chip quilt and do it easily and quickly. I hope you give this a try. Thanks so much for being here, and thank you for watching. It's been such fun to share this with you. As always, it's my pleasure. Thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.